Welcome to the Gut Show. I'm Erin Judge, registered dietitian and founder of Gutivate, and I will be your host. My goal on this side of the internet is to empower those with IBS and digestive disorders to understand their guts better, to have a healthier relationship with their bodies, and make confident choices to improve their digestive health. During this season of the Gut Show, you can expect a weekly conversation covering a hot topic related to health, digestion, and IBS. As a disclaimer, I am a dietitian, but I'm not your personal dietitian. Everything we cover in this episode is meant to be educational and not a substitute for personalized care from your healthcare team. Welcome, and let's dive into today's episode. Are you really fed up with your IBS symptoms controlling your life? Are you frustrated with feeling like you're going in circles day in and day out, and you seem to try things on your own? You're taking in all the information, but you're still finding yourself stuck. If that's you, I invite you to join the Master Method membership. This is a science-backed holistic program for IBS that we've developed with you in mind. It covers what to do to support digestion, how to support the drivers of IBS, including gut-brain connection, your microbiome, altered motility, and even altered immune activation. We also talk about how to support your nutrition and your overall health through your diet, with a focus on what to actually add to your diet versus only what to take away. And we guide you through all 3 steps of the low FODMAP diet process in many different ways if you want to use that evidence-based tool for IBS. This program has been proven to work with many with IBS because it truly does approach health and well-being from a whole body perspective, while also targeting IBS specifically. Our founding membership is now open for enrollment until May 31st. So if you're ready to get guidance so that you can take control of your symptoms, join a community of others who are working on their IBS and ready to connect with those who get it, and lifestyle resources to help you every step of the way, then join the membership today at the link in show notes. Welcome back to the Gut Show. Today's episode is following our self-care episode really well, because today we're going to talk about your nervous system. And if there's one thing that I've learned whenever I've looked at, the research that's been developed over the past, 5 to 10 years in IBS, whenever I look at my own experience with clients and even my own personal experience with IBS over the many, many years that I've had it, I know that there is one thing that stands true, and that is that you cannot out diet and you cannot out supplement a dysregulated nervous system. That's very true. And the role of the nervous system is starting to gain the traction that it truly deserves. And so you may have heard, me say something like that online, or other people say things like that. You may see targeted kind of ads or messages that are related to this. And while there may be, the role of whatever ads you're getting and whatever that is, it's best to start with understanding what your nervous system is, what it means to have a dysregulated nervous system, and what you can actually do to start regulating it or start kind of supporting your nervous system in that balance so that your gut can benefit from that, as well as your overall health. So that is what we're going to talk about today. And my hope is that you leave this conversation feeling a bit more empowered with that knowledge, as well as things that you can actually do. Because when we talk about stress management, when we talk about gut-brain disconnection, it's very easy to think like, oh, there's nothing I can really do, or this feels very daunting. And so my goal is that after this conversation, that does not feel as daunting. Let's start with really breaking down what your nervous system actually is. So the nervous system is the major regulatory system of the body that's the center of all mental activity. So that includes your thoughts, your memory, as well as learning. Think of this as like the command center of your body. Your nervous system is involved in taking in information, processing that information, and then transmitting kind of a signal that will then influence maybe an action or what else happens. So it's more than just what you think, but really involved in the processes and how your body actually functions. Your nervous system works with your endocrine system, which is your hormonal system in the body, and your hormones are messengers. And so these two systems work together in order to help keep the body in balance and keep it functioning properly. So your nervous system will take in information. It will then process that information and it sends a signal. Your hormones kind of take those signals and run with them. And they are the true messengers in the shortest, most basic sense. We know that your nervous system has an impact on every single system in the body, as well as the functions of all organs. Your nervous system either is a supporter or is a true regulator of the different systems that are going on in the body. And ideally, these systems work kind of as these little spoke wheels where they're all working in unison and they're all working in harmony. We know that your nervous system uses receptors to communicate with the environment and adjust in order to respond both externally and internally. So that's where they do that processing. And that includes sensors on kind of your skin, like hairs, things like that. They can actually sense your environment. Like if you're cold, that cold temperature first interacts with your sensors, and then that your nervous system is the one that actually then responds with the shivering and that feeling of cold, which then signals you to get a jacket or a sweater and cover up or get warm, right? There's a process that happens, and those sensors are really important. There are also sensors on the inside of your body, and there are sensors along your entire GI tract. We see this a lot in the role of visceral hypersensitivity and IBS. It can be really sensory as a problem because the body senses, and then there's a disconnect in that signaling that happens based on what the sense is, right? And so your nervous system is really, it involves those nerves, which is where nervous comes from, but it also involves the way that the body then responds to what those sensors are gathering. The main organs that are involved in your nervous system or that make up your nervous system include your brain, your spinal cord, your nerves, and what we call the ganglia, which are attached to your nerves. The major functions of your nervous system, one is sensory, which means that we monitor the environment and we gather information, as we've said. Integrative, which is the conversion of your sensory information to the nerve impulses that are sent to the brain. And then the motor activity, which is the response. So again, sensing the information, gathering information, translating, transmitting, figuring out what that information truly does mean, and then the response or what you do after. So the sending out of that information so that there is a response to it in some way. And ideally, the response matches what the body truly needs. But in some cases, there's a disconnect in either the sensing or in the integration component or even in the motor function. And again, we see this a lot with IBS. There are two nervous systems that actually make up the major nervous system. And we call this the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Your central nervous system is made up of your brain and your spinal cord. And this is really the command center. So this is responsible for sending out messages. So the processing and the messaging kind of happens in this central nervous system. Your peripheral nervous system includes the nerves that branch out throughout the entire body. And this is where information is truly relayed. So it's almost like you have the command center that sends one signal, and then that signal is then given to a lot of different workers that then go out and transmit it through the peripheral nervous system. It's an easy, simple way of thinking about it. When we break it down again, your peripheral nervous system includes two nervous systems. So we have your somatic nervous system, and this guides the voluntary movements of your body. So think about doing a bicep curl. That's a voluntary muscle activity movement. Walking is a voluntary movement. We also have your autonomic nervous system, which guides involuntary activities. So like even your heartbeat is considered kind of an involuntary movement. And this is a more autonomic nervous system piece. The movement of your gut and your gut muscles is also considered involuntary and is controlled in part by this autonomic nervous system. Now, your autonomic nervous system can be in two different states. And think of this like a light switch. You have your parasympathetic nervous system state, which we call our rest and digest state. And then we have the sympathetic nervous system state, which is the stress state or the body's stress response. So whenever your body is in a sympathetic nervous system state or the stress response, what that means is that your body senses that, okay, there is a stressor somewhere, right? There's a threat, there is danger, and we need to respond. And so your autonomic nervous system switches off some of the functions in your body to prioritize the ones that are going to be involved in reacting to the harm. So that includes your heart, right, to pump blood faster so that you can use it, maybe even muscle activity, right, we're pumping blood and oxygen to your muscles so that you can run, you can fight, you can do whatever you need to do. We're supporting the brain, even lung capacity so that you can breathe. All of that is supported, while other organs, including your digestive system, get turned down. So what we see with digestion is that stomach acid secretions are decreased, the peristalsis or movement of those gut muscles is slowed down. Sometimes we see an emptying of the bladder or the colon like immediately. So some people will either pee or poop whenever they're under like that imminent danger, that stress, because it allows the body to get rid of what's stored, because we're going to be fighting or flighting for a long period of time. And all the other different secretions and functions of organs that are involved in digestion, including like your pancreas, your liver, and your gallbladder, those are all turned down. So what this can mean is that if you're chronically in this stressed state or this sympathetic nervous system state, then your body is going to be operating at a lower digestive capacity than what it is meant to. And most people aren't at a very heightened sympathetic nervous system response, like a true fight or flight response, but a lot of people are at this kind of low grade, low level sympathetic nervous system state, which is still impacting their digestion. The opposite, the other side of that light switch, is the parasympathetic nervous system state, which is what we call that rest and digest state. In this state, your heart doesn't need quite as much, your brain doesn't need quite as much, because we're not fighting, right? The body's able to really function and kind of balance. And so what we see is that the digestive organs are all working at their highest capacity, movement of the digestive tract is working well, and everything's going smoothly. And this is where we want to be the majority of the time, because this allows the body to, again, digest properly. This is also where hormones are most happy. This is also where even like your brain function, like there's less anxiety, there's less of that stressed kind of feeling or heightened sense state involved. So this is really important. Now, when we think about what causes the nervous system to malfunction, because that can be a main problem outside of just being in the stress state, sometimes the whole system can malfunction outside of your choice, if that makes sense. And so there are certain causes where the nervous system is not working properly, either through the central nervous system or even the peripheral nervous system. And the first one is nerve damage, which kind of makes sense, right? If you have damage to your nerves, they can't send or receive messages, and then things don't go as they should be. And this can happen from disease, stroke is very common, injury, like internal injury, this can happen, pressure, internal pressure, toxic substances can definitely do this, like poison and even certain drugs and things like that. And then with aging, nerve damage can happen as well. So we do see nerve damage with age. Another malfunction cause can be changes in temperature, pressure, and blood flow. We see this often whenever someone's under kind of a harsh environment. So if you're in extreme heat for a prolonged period of time or extreme cold for a prolonged period of time, this can contribute to malfunctions of the nervous system and could possibly even be a problem with the nerves themselves and cause damage to nerves. We know that stress can cause the nervous system to malfunction. Not only is stress, again, you being in a stress state, and so being in that nervous system state that is not really ideal for prolonged periods of time. So stress can actually trigger chemicals in the brain to bypass messages sent to the brain to set off an alarm. So being under stress is not just putting you in the stress state, which is the result of the alarm, but in the process of sending out that alarm, we're bypassing other messages, which means that things aren't being reported, they're not being sent properly, and then the response that is needed for those messages that were sent isn't going to happen. So the body's not getting what it needs in response to what information it's gathering, which can be detrimental in a lot of areas of health. And then we also know sleep deprivation can be a huge reason for the nervous system to malfunction. And sleep is an area that we tend to focus on a lot when it comes to IBS and the gut. And this really is where this matters the most, right? It's easy to say, oh, you have to sleep every single night. But the reason behind that is because prolonged sleep deprivation, which could be under that 7 to 9 hours per night. So it's not even just that you're getting 0 hours of sleep. If you're getting 5 hours of sleep every single night, you could be in a state of sleep deprivation, and your nervous system could be responding to that level of deprivation, which could be impacting all of the organs, all of the functions in your body, all of the different systems going on in your body over time. And that's a really important thing to be aware of, but also target when we're looking at regulating the nervous system, we're going to talk about in a moment. So bringing this all back to IBS and the gut, how does this impact your gut? How does the nervous system impact the gut? So we know that the gut and the brain are connected, and the nervous system plays a role in this connection and in this communication. We talk about the gut-brain axis all the time, and we've learned that. The interesting part is that the nervous system is the connection in a lot of ways. And what's really going on between the gut and the brain and their connection is a connection between the central nervous system, like we talked about, and then what we call the enteric nervous system or the intrinsic nervous system. So the enteric nervous system is also part of the autonomic nervous system, and this governs the function of the GI tract, and we call this the second brain. So the enteric nervous system is like a mini central nervous system. It's made up the exact same way. It has the same kind of networks and neurons and all the things going on as the central nervous system. It's just much smaller and kind of more located in the gut and stays a bit more in the gut versus the central nervous system kind of branching out to everyone else. And so the enteric nervous system can function alongside the central nervous system through their connection, but it can also function independently of the central nervous system and vice versa. So this means that these nervous systems can either work together or they can work opposite of each other, which could lead to this kind of disconnect and poor communication and poor function between both of those sides of the body. They're not just two organs, right? The brain and the gut. It's these networks in the way that these organs and what's going on in these organs interact with other organs and other functions and other messages in the body. That's where the key is. And the nervous systems are the key components of that. So some of the functions of the gut that are impacted by your nervous system include peristalsis, or the muscle, like smooth muscle movement in the GI tract, enzyme secretion. Enzymes help break down foods that we eat, and they're a major part of digestion. And so if they're not secreted properly, that can be a problem. And then inflammatory responses. We know that a lot of our immune cells are located in the gut. We also know that when the body's in a state of inflammation, that's a response to a potential threat, then that can impact the way that the gut functions because we're in a stress state. But that inflammation can also kind of make its way to the gut, causing less gut permeability, which then can further the problems of inflammation, but can also impact the balance of the gut microbiome. Aside from that, we also know that nerves and neurons, which make up the nervous systems, those are involved in digestion and pain, right? Because pain is a signaling and response problem. When your body senses things moving through your gut, senses the stretching of the abdominal wall due to gas buildup or constipation or fluid buildup, like water buildup, which we see a lot in diarrhea or even certain carbohydrate malabsorption or intolerances, when that happens, your body communicates that sensation, and the response, which is the nerve and neuron piece, the response is this increased sensation of pain. And so that's that visceral hypersensitivity piece that is so unique to IBS that can be quite frustrating and confusing because other people don't experience it. And there's not always a clear explanation of why it's happening, but that is what is going on. So it's really a kind of misdirect and a malfunction of the nervous system and that gut-brain kind of communication piece. So what can you do to actually support your nervous system? We know that it plays a role. We know that there's a major regulatory, component to it, where if it's healthy, if it's functioning properly, things are going to go well. And when it's not, things are not going to go well. And so in many cases of digestion problems and issues, then we can see that the nervous system could possibly be dysregulated, especially when we see not just gut issues, but we see anxiety, we see stress, we feel that heightened response, right? We feel kind of on edge, then that's a sign that the nervous system likely does need more support. So one thing that you can do is eat a healthy, well-balanced diet. And that sounds kind of fairly vague, but there are certain things that we can really focus on that are actually going to help with the health of your nervous system. The first one is adequate omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and B vitamins. So your omega-3 fatty acids you're going to get from things like fatty fish, walnuts or flaxseed. You can also do omega-3 supplements, which you could include like fish oil. Vitamin D, we primarily get from the sun. Our body takes in from the sun, and then through our skin, we actually convert the vitamin D to the form that we would store and would be used by our bodies. Vitamin D is something that many people, especially in the US, are very low in and deficient in. So it's important to make sure that's getting checked every year. You can get vitamin D from some foods, like salmon is actually a decent source of vitamin D. Sometimes they'll add vitamin D to fortified products. You see it a lot with milks, and even some orange juices may have vitamin D added in. But for the most part, if you are deficient, supplementation is often encouraged and used. And then B vitamins you're going to find through a variety of your proteins and meat products, but also through some of your plant foods. So primarily meat products are going to be pretty high in B vitamins. You can also find them in things like eggs or even dairy products, but you'll also find them in leafy greens. You can find them in some legumes may have a really high combination of different B vitamins, and then a variety of plants. Polyphenols are another part of the diet that can really benefit the nervous system and the function of your nervous systems. And these are the antioxidant components in plants. And so we see these in many plants, especially those like richly deep colored plants tend to be the highest in polyphenols, like your berries and things like that. But eating a variety of plant foods can really increase polyphenol content. Curcumin is another nutrient that can be really impactful. And this is another word for turmeric, if you're familiar with the turmeric root. This has proven effects on neural health and can be really beneficial. And you can add it fairly easily by adding turmeric, ground turmeric to things, drinking teas with turmeric in it. You can get decent amounts of this nutrient. Different minerals, especially calcium and potassium, are really beneficial. And these are not always given the focus that they deserve over vitamins like vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin A, B vitamins. Our minerals are also really important and really valuable. And sometimes they are missing from the diet, especially if you're not eating a diverse kind of, again, plant-rich diet, or even a diet of whole foods. Like you're going to find minerals in your meats and different protein foods, but we also can find them in a lot of our plant foods. And then herbal teas, which can help increase the production of serotonin and dopamine. Certain teas can help with that. And so that can be part of, again, that healthy, well-balanced diet that will then support the nervous system. Another thing that you can do is avoid any drugs or other substances that might cause harm of nerves. This is really important because sometimes this nerve damage is not reversible. And so if there is nerve damage caused, it's something that's going to be working against you. And so reducing harm as much as you can is going to be really important. Another thing is moderating your alcohol intake. We know that alcohol doesn't really have benefits. So the benefit really is more of the social piece and enjoyment. And so really making sure to keep that low, maybe mixing it up with different things that are non-alcoholic. If you enjoy having like a drink, maybe including mocktails versus just like cocktails or things like that, to find a variety of drinks that you can enjoy that maybe don't have as much alcohol, so that you can decrease your overall intake. Consistent exercise is key, and that could be yoga, mind-body exercises, stretching. Those will all help kind of keep your cortisol or that stress hormone low, which will then support the nervous system, helping keep it in that rest and digest state. But also movement and exercise overall can be such an important part of regulating your nervous system, and especially getting outside. That can be really beneficial for increasing things like dopamine and some of those hormones that can help you feel good. And that stimulates, again, some of that response that the body has. And then the most important thing that you always need to start with, if you're not already, is sleep. And not just adequate sleep, which again is that 7 to 9 hours per night, but we also want to have consistent quality sleep. So making sure to decrease exposure to things that are stimulating in the evening, decreasing your caffeine intake later in the day, because that can interfere with your sleep quality, keeping things kind of dark, keeping your environment quiet, allowing the body to truly relax, maybe turning screens off. All of that before you go to sleep can be so beneficial and help you have decent quality sleep, and then making sure you're able to get in that 7 to 9 hours as much as you possibly can. And not even just that, but even maintaining a consistent schedule of that, where you're going to bed around the same time every night, waking up around the same time every morning. We know that that can have such a strong impact on your health overall, especially the health of your nervous system. We see that in the research with shift workers who have these rotating schedules of sleep that can really have a negative impact on the body's function, and especially the way the nervous system responds. So even stress resilience and the stress response. So if you're not already sleeping, and if that hasn't convinced you already, that is key, and that is where you have to begin. And when we say you can't out diet, you can't out exercise, you can't out supplement a dysregulated nervous system, sleep is at the core of that and is often the missing piece that is overlooked or just not prioritized like it should be when it comes to the function of the body. And I see that all the time with IBS and digestive disorders. So my goal whenever we started this conversation is that you could walk away with even 1 to 2 tools that you can start to use today to help support your nervous system, and the power of knowledge and understanding how your body is working on a deeper level. It's pretty fascinating, but that power in knowing, okay, this is what's really going on. This is how, these different manifestations of physical symptoms I'm seeing, this is where it might be linked and connected. That's what I hope that you're taking away, so that you can decide where you want to go and what you want to do next, because that's so important. And thinking about your next steps, there are a lot of different things that we can do as nervous system survival tactics, or things to kind of really relax the nervous system or kind of get it calmed down. If you know that things feel very dysregulated and you're working on those, core things, but you just feel like things are completely out of control, there are some places where you can begin, and that could be your breath work. Diaphragmatic breathing, slow controlled breaths can really help. Heart tapping, or just tapping overall, and you can look that up on Google or even on YouTube if you want to. Mindfulness and grounding exercises, and this could be led by somebody if that's what you need. Visualization exercises can be helpful. Different gentle movements, especially mind-body movement like yoga or Pilates, even walking can be really helpful. Cold water splashed on your face or a cold shower can be helpful. Sunshine, again, it can promote some of that serotonin, which is going to be beneficial. Spending time with loved ones, and so getting around people that you love, friends, that can be helpful. Leaning into spiritual practices, relaxation strategies, and also therapy. We can't overlook the value of therapy, especially if things feel, again, very chaotic, very out of control, and you have no idea where to begin, or if there's other things that are causing some of that stress to your nervous system, like trauma can be a big one, then you definitely want to go through therapy and work on it with someone who can kind of help guide you. There are also different medications and supplements that are often used for the nervous system. And so that can include things like tricyclic antidepressants, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Those things could be possibly beneficial, and that's something you would discuss with your medical providers. From a supplement standpoint, there is L-theanine, which has been shown to improve stress and stimulate the production of serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. That might be beneficial, and again, something you can discuss with your providers. And then ashwagandha, which has been around for a very long time and is used to help reduce cortisol production and improve nervous system communication. So again, that's something that you can talk to your providers about, because we don't want to introduce anything without making sure it is safe and effective for our bodies based on our history. And that's what your providers will know the best. I hope this was a great conversation for you. Tune in next week on the Get Show, and we're going to talk about orthorexia, which will be a bit of a shifting conversation, but so important, especially when we're thinking about making some of these healthy choices and healthy shifts in our lives. Like, we want to make sure we don't take it too far to then cause even more harm, which just feels a lot like a delicate balance. So next week, we'll talk all about that. So hope that you join me. And I can't wait to hear what you took away from this episode. Do you want to keep learning from me in bite-sized pieces, as well as even be able to ask me questions and get those answered? If that is true, then you should follow me on social media so that you can learn from myself, but also my incredible team. You can find us on Instagram at erinjudge.rd or at Gutivate. You can also find us at TikTok, same name. And then you can also find us, if you're not already on YouTube for longer and shorter videos than the one that you listened to today. And if you're someone who really does enjoy compiled information from different brands we trust and different recipes that we enjoy, then you can also follow us on Pinterest, where you can see our own boards, but also the boards that we have been able to compile other great IBS friendly links and resources for you.